Hello, Happy Valley. Today's video is all about the element of art, space. Not talking about outer space, but I'm talking about the space in which something occupies, whether that's a sculpture, an architectural building, or we're talking about two-dimensional surfaces like a piece of paper or a canvas. And when we work with space, we'll be primarily sticking with two dimensions. But this is one of our most intense elements. There's lots of drawing involved, lots of art exercises that we will be taking part in. Anyway, let's get started. All right, so let's start on the first part of the element of art known as space. This is going to be done in two parts. So when we talk about space and we define space, there are really two definitions. Space in two dimensions. So that's talking about implied forms, making things look realistic. So talking about drawings, paintings, anything done on a flat surface. So when we talk about space in this situation, we're referring to the way that the objects are arranged on the composition, how you place those objects on the surface in which you're working. And when we work with space, that is the area in which we are going to send our focus to, working with implied form, making things look as realistic as possible while working on a two-dimensional surface. Opposite of that would be space in three dimensions. So that's talking about real forms, actual forms, sculptures, architectural buildings. And that's referring to the space in which the sculpture or structure is occupying. The area around it, above it, below it, between it, all those fun little words, is talking about how that is being interpreted in the space in which it's occupying. And when we're working with two dimensions, artists use techniques, optical. Think of the eye. They're working with these techniques, and there's 5 of them, and they use them to create this illusion, this look of depth on a flat surface. And the first one of those is known as size relationships. And it states that as your eye moves back into a picture, as you look from the front of the picture towards the back of the picture, the objects are supposed to become smaller because they're further away than the viewer. And this little image on here that we see, we know that that woman is the same size as the man, but because she's in the distance and he is closest to the viewer, to the camera, he appears much larger than she does. Here's some fun little pictures playing with the size relationships, remembering that things that are closer to the viewer are going to appear larger, things that are further away from the viewer are going to appear smaller. Our second optical perspective technique is the placement of objects. When you are working on a flat surface, the objects that you place higher up than others in a drawing or in a painting are going to appear as if they are further back. Now, if you look back here in this picture, they've actually placed the horizon line. The horizon line is very, very close to the top of that paper. So we are able to see the tops of some of our buildings. So it looks as if we are a bird in the sky. So again, some of these buildings, though, that are placed up closer, appear as if they are further away from us. And here's some other little images like that. Again, we have buildings placed closer to the top of the picture. It makes them appear as if they're further away from us. The ballerinas and people observing in the back here are closer to the top, therefore they appear further back. Our third optical perspective technique is overlapping of objects. So if you place one object in front of another, the ones that are in front, and then we have those that are in back, they are partially exposed. We're concealing parts of that. It appears as if they are further back into space. All right, so placing things in closer to the front that are whole, placing things behind them that are partially concealed, we're only seeing parts of that, is a way to show the illusion of depth, make it look as if those things are further behind. And here we have just an overlapping of circles. Obviously, we can see the whole circle here of the red, so that is in front, the orange goes behind that, yellow, green, and so on and so forth. Again, a few paintings or illustrations or game backgrounds that I see here. So we have, of course, the illustration of the waves. Waves appear further back just based on the overlapping of them. You have the pyramids of Giza over on the left-hand side. Again, the further back they are, the less we are able to see of those pyramids. And then that bottom image is a picture from a game of some sorts where we're able to see things overlapping, which makes it appear as if they are further back. Our fourth optical perspective talks about value. Now, we haven't gotten to value yet. That's our fifth element. But value, again, I already taught you guys that value is how light or dark a color is. So when you gradually lessen the value of an object, it's going to appear further back in the composition. And what other place are we, to live than to see this in nature? And we live near the Blue Ridge Mountains. Every day, I live in Gray, so every day that I drive to Elizabethton, I get to see this in person. And so the mountains that are closer to me are going to appear much bolder, much darker, and the ones that are further away from me are appearing much lighter. They're closer to the sun. So they are going to get lighter and lighter and lighter in value. And this is a way that artists use shading to make things also appear further back in the composition. Now we really, with this unit, I focus more on drawing and making things look more realistic than I focus on adding value. Of course, we'll do that when we get to value. So this is one of those optical perspective techniques that I don't necessarily focus on, but is very important. Again, making things look further back. They're closer to the sun. They're further away from the viewer. They're going to appear lighter. And our last optical perspective technique is details. So as objects become further away from us, they have more distance than us, then we are going to lose clarity. We're going to, not be able to see as clearly as those that are in the foreground that are closer to us. And so I use this painting as a great example. The objects, the barmaid, the objects that are closest to us, we're able to read the labels to see the entire forms or the entire objects. But if you look behind her, we have a mirror image. We see people, but we don't see details in their faces. We aren't able to see their eye colors or their lip colors or make out these features because they are further away from us. We are not able to see those types of things. We don't have powers where we can really make out these details. So again, as things go away from us, we are unable to really focus and read those details. And looking at these pictures, of course, the one on the right-hand side is a photoshopped image. This is not something realistic, but still they use those optical perspective techniques to imply the illusion of depth. So we see the rock formations, the cracks in the ground, the dryness of the ground in the foreground towards the viewer. And then as we look in the distance, things become more blurry. They blend together. We no longer can see those individual cracks and crevices in the ground, just as the picture on the left-hand side. And then, of course, we have this aerial view of a staircase. And notice as you can make out the individual stairs up at the top, but as you go down into that little black hole, you lose that ability. You might see bits and pieces of it, but you aren't able to see every individual step anymore because we are losing those details. Now, once you get really good with optical perspective, you can have a little bit of fun. So I've got some really cool art pieces to show you that are optical illusions playing with the optical perspective techniques. I think these are really fun. This one is my all-time favorite. All right, so we have optical perspective, which is working with the eye to create an illusion of depth. But then we have linear perspective. And linear perspective is a system with rules that helps artists represent the illusion of depth in their artwork on these two-dimensional surfaces. Now, this was lost during the Renaissance, or I'm sorry, pre-Renaissance, so the Middle Ages. So between the ancient eras of the Greek and the Roman era, we had this, during that time, we had this desire to create things as realistic as possible. So if you look at a lot of Greek and Roman sculpture, you can really see them perfecting the human form, trying to make things look as realistic. You don't see as many paintings, and that's because that stuff just didn't make it throughout the years. They didn't have the qualities of paints that we do today. But anyway, they had this desire to create realistic, the human form, or realistic paintings and things like that. We lose that in the Middle Ages. I don't know. I don't know how we lost it. It just got lost. The ideas. I think there were so many transitions between, movements between people, nomadic movements where people were moving and things shifting and ideas shifting, religions shifting, that somehow, some way, this got lost. But it was rediscovered in the 15th century by a Renaissance artist and an architect. His name was Filippo Brunelleschi. And he rediscovers this idea. So I'm not saying that this idea did not exist. It did. But it was Filippo Brunelleschi who brought it back to the surface. And so he found this idea. Now, it wasn't written down or it wasn't anything like that. He realized that when his paintings, if you look at paintings from the pre-Renaissance or early Renaissance, really close to that time frame where we have the shift, you can see that that artists were trying their best to get things to look realistic, but they were just missing the mark in some way. And there wasn't any kind of literature, any kind of written, rules. And so it was Filippo Brunelleschi who developed this system, who developed these rules, and developed a way for artists to create this illusion of depth. And so the picture that you see up on the right-hand side, this is the formula that he created. Okay, so again, prior to this time, artists, they were really trying, but they were just slightly missing the mark. And here's some pictures of that time period. Here's an optical perspective. This is not a little toy fort that these men are staying in. These are supposed to be a real fort. Look at these giants. They're not giants. They're just regular people. But we were not understanding that you had to, the size relationships between the two. You can't have these giant figures here. They need to be much, much, much smaller. If you look at the bookshelf to the right-hand side right here, okay, things are looking realistic, but then you look at these doors, and if you were to try to shut these doors on here, you would have a lot of spaces missing in between that area. Again, the idea is there. Look at the table, okay? That would not be able to exist on that table. It would slide off because of the way the angle is created. And the same thing goes down here. This table, none of that stuff would be able to sit on that table. It would have all slidden off by now. The bench itself is just stretched and skewed. That just looks bizarre. You have these enlarged figures, way too large for the area in which they are occupying. But there are some good qualities in here, some ideas that are happening. And then on this, you would not be able to see from this perspective, from this vantage point, you would not be able to see multiple sides of this cathedral, of this church. They were trying to show that in their image. So again, we're just there. We're almost there. We're just missing the mark. And it was Filippo Brunelleschi who really brought this system, this idea, these rules to the forefront and changed the way artists create things, in which we still use this formula today, developed in the 15th century. That's the 1400s, and we still use it today. That's how impactful it is in the art world. So this linear perspective that I'm talking about, it has three components, three tools that need to be displayed in order for them to work properly. You have the horizon line, vanishing point or points, and receding lines. Now when working with perspective, you can go all the way up to, I think, 6 or 7 points. We will never do that. We're going to work with 1 point, 2 point perspective. But with perspective, you have a horizon line. Okay, think of a horizontal line. And a horizon line is just simply a line that's drawn across the picture, a line that's drawn across your composition. And this line, wherever you place it on the page, is communicating that that's where the horizon is, obviously, but that's always where your eye is going to look. Okay, so the horizon line will always be at the eye level of the viewer. Okay, whether you are at the ground level, whether you're at the top of a mountain, it changes as you change your position of the viewer for your drawing, not as you move around the picture. It doesn't change. I'm talking about the way that wherever you place it on your picture frame, I'm sorry, your composition, the viewer, it will always change depending on where you move that line. So let's talk about the position of a viewer. And there are three positions. You have a bird's eye. So pretend that you are a bird in the sky and you are looking down at your subject. So you're able to see the tops of things. A normal view, we are no longer able to see, the top or the bottom. We are just able to look straight ahead and see the object straight on. And then you have a worm's eye view. Think of yourself as a worm. You're going to be looking up at the subject because you're down on the ground. The second component to linear perspective is vanishing points. And these are just imaginary points that are on the horizon line, and that receding lines will eventually join. So you have to have this. I feel like this is the most crucial part to perspective, is having that vanishing point. And I've had kids throughout the years not add the vanishing point onto their artworks, and it creates so much of an issue. So I personally feel that the vanishing point is the most important tool for linear perspective. But you'll have receding lines, which I'm about to go over, that go to that. They will eventually meet at that dot. So the vanishing point really is an imaginary dot, obviously, but it is the furthest part of your composition. It's the furthest that you are able to see. It's the distance. It is the last thing that you can see before you cannot see anymore. And then you have receding lines. Parallel, meaning they run beside each other, and they don't touch, of course, until they gradually move away from you and they meet at the vanishing point. So eventually those parallel lines do meet, but when we work with them, generally, we're working on things that are in the foreground. So a receding line, these are also what I call guidelines when you're working with perspective. So they recede away. They go towards that vanishing point, and that's where they will eventually join. Now the picture above is working with 1 point, so this would be a 1 point perspective. And then this picture above or below here, we have 2 points. There's a point there where the blue lines are going, a point there where the red lines are going. And this box is just showing that the red are running parallel to each other, never touching. The blue on this box are running parallel to each other. When we use 1 point perspective, the object is parallel to us, meaning it's looking straight at us. Okay, and when you are working with 1 point perspective, you know that you're working with 1 point perspective when you draw the front of your object first, the closest part to you first. So here we have a little house. The front of that house is facing us, so we draw the front of that box. That's what 1 point perspective is. Okay, and this is the 1 point perspective formula. Of course, you have your horizon line that runs across your picture plane, the vanishing point that is placed somewhere on that horizon line, and then this is your receding lines. They can be below the horizon or above the horizon or even on the horizon. And receding lines eventually meet at the vanishing point. They go towards that vanishing point. So here are some images that are in 1-point perspective. And when you're trying to find the horizon line, the vanishing point, the receding lines, it can sometimes be overwhelming. So I like to think of it like a math problem, like you're checking yourself. You know how you do a math problem one way and then you do like division to check it or multiplication to check it, make sure that it's right. So let's just backtrack. If you can't find the horizon line and then you can't find the vanishing point, look for the receding lines. Receding lines will always go towards the vanishing point. We know the vanishing point will be resting on the horizon line. So our horizon line, and this one's very clear, very easy to see, is right here, dead center. You can see the horizon itself, the background. You can see from the ground towards the sky, and that's what breaks that up. If you cannot find the vanishing point, look for those receding lines, and they will recede towards the vanishing point. If you look at the edges of the buildings and things like that, these little lines right here, or the cracks in the ground, they are all receding towards that vanishing point. The Last Supper, okay, this one, if you can't find the horizon line, look for the vanishing point. If you can't find that, look for receding lines. And this one has tons of receding lines. You can see here, things are going towards somewhere, Look up in the ceiling. You can see things that are all going towards something. And now I'm sure you've probably figured it out, but your vanishing point is right there on Jesus himself. And then if you look behind here, you can kind of see that horizon line. And even looking below here, look at the edge of the tables. They are going towards Jesus, so that they are receding towards Jesus as well. All right, we're going to do one more. So again, if you cannot find that horizon line, you cannot find the vanishing point, look for those receding lines. They're going to recede towards that vanishing point. So if you can tell, our horizon line runs right here. So our vanishing point must be here in the center. And then our receding lines recede towards that. All right, so that is part 1 of the element of art, space.